The Houston Texans already have a physically dominant wide receiver in Nico Collins. Collins goes out there, imposes his will on opposing defenses, and makes huge plays for the Houston Texans. But you know what's better than one physically dominant playmaking wide receiver? How about two physically dominant playmaking wide receivers? And that's the potential future for the Houston Texans because DK Metcalf is available via trade. The Seattle Seahawks granting Metcalf's representation permission to go find a trade partner for the Seahawks and find a new team for the physically imposing and impressive DK Metcalf. How does he fit for the Houston Texans? How expensive is it to get DK Metcalf? And ultimately, should they be chasing DK Metcalf here just days before free agency gets going? Let's talk about it. Man, DK Metcalf is an impressive player, consistency personified in his career, and he's coming off a little bit of a hiccup of a season, but man, he's so good. He'll be 27 for most of this season coming up, and throughout most of his career, he's been a for sure 1,000 yards, physically dominant, has a very tough cover for opposing defenses, and he's paired well with a variety of different wide receivers in his time. Tyler Lockett has been with them. They added Jackson Smith and Jigba as well, and Metcalf's had success with a couple of different quarterbacks in his time in Seattle as well, both Russell Wilson, who's very, very good, and Geno Smith, who's just kind of okay. I mean, fitting him with the Houston Texans gives them two absolute dominant presences, easy for you to say, easy for me to say. Two absolutely dominating presences on the outside with their wide receiver room. It's probably DK Metcalf and Nico Collins, the most physically imposing wide receiver combo around when you think about putting those two on the same team together. Just how well they use their body, how physical they are with opposing defenses, how they can use their body to contort and control the point of catch and then go out there and be physical after the catch as well. It's two really impressive wide receivers, and putting Metcalf with Collins, man, that would give CJ Stroud two huge targets, two super productive players. I know a little bit of a down season this most recent year for DK Metcalf, but that 3-year average for Metcalf, 74 receptions, over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's pretty tough to not get excited about if the Texans were able to add a guy like this. And you think about the need at wide receiver, they need an outside guy opposite Nico Collins. You could fill in that slot position with a veteran in free agency, or maybe you find a rookie in the upcoming draft. But Nico Collins on the outside, DK Metcalf on the outside, a physically dominant duo for CJ Stroud to go out there and get the football to. It's a really enticing and exciting idea when you start to think about it. Now, of course, you got to go out there and get DK Metcalf. What's the price of doing business to go and get Metcalf? Well, he's going to be one of the best receivers available to teams that need wide receivers. And you start thinking across the league about the variety of different teams that need wide receivers. The Packers have talked about going out and getting a number one wide receiver. Obviously, the New England Patriots need a big-time wide receiver. You could look at any number of teams that need a big-time wide receiver. They should be doing their checking on DK Metcalf and find out exactly what the price is. So it's a twofold investment. You've got to trade for DK Metcalf. That costs draft capital. And then you've got to go out there and pay DK Metcalf as he's headed into the final year of his contract extension that he signed with the Seattle Seahawks. So let's figure out the price to go and get DK Metcalf. I don't believe it costs the first round pick. Now, the bidding war gets a little crazy, and maybe you're doing some swapping and some adding, and I suppose the first round pick gets in the conversation, but I would think at least the Texans' second round selection is on the board if they're thinking about trading for DK Metcalf. If they're trying to go make that investment, I would think the Seahawks are at least looking for that second round selection and then some in a trade. And Nick Caserio can get creative. Maybe it's the Texans 2 and 4 for DK Metcalf and a future third or something of that nature. But it certainly takes one of the day 2 selections off the board for the Texans. But of course, you're getting DK Metcalf. So that's a pricey price to pay I'm sure I could have said that better. That's an expensive price to pay, but there's not a lot of options when you look around at wide receivers in free agency or other wide receivers that are available for trade that are as impressive and as consistent as DK Metcalf. Now, if you start to get into a bidding war, it becomes even more expensive because you get DK Metcalf interested in your team. Maybe there's multiple teams interested, and the Seahawks keep trying to drive the price up. All of a sudden, the Texans sitting here with 6 selections in the upcoming NFL draft. They don't have as much in the war chest as some of these other teams, and I don't imagine, again, that they'd be interested in trading that first-round pick. But let's say you could find the compensation. You could figure out exactly what it costs from a draft pick compensation and maybe sending a player over in the trade as well, and you end up trading for DK Metcalf. You got to pay him. And the tough part about paying DK Metcalf is he's going to be the latest wide receiver to go to the trough and try to scoop up a whole bunch of money, and he's going to be expensive. He will probably be more expensive than Nico Collins. And you think about what Nico Collins has done the past couple of seasons. He's actually been more productive on average than DK Metcalf over the past 2 years. You take Nico Collins' 2-year average, you smash it against DK Metcalf's 3-year average, and Collins has actually been better on average. So it'd be kind of tough for the Texans to bring a guy in and immediately pay him more than their top wide receiver, wouldn't it? Now, obviously, DK Metcalf has a track record, a much longer track record than Nico Collins when Collins went to the negotiating table. So I suppose you could sell it that way, but it's a big contract to add. It's a big contract to add on top of the big contract that Nico Collins already has, and it's a multi-year commitment as well. Now, obviously, in the future, Laramie Tunsil's contract could come off the books. Titus Howard's contract could come off the books. You'll get Danico Autry off the books, Azeez Al-Shire off the books in the coming years, but you're putting DK Metcalf on the books now. Derek Stingley's got to get a contract extension. Will Anderson's got to get a contract extension. CJ Stroud has got to get a contract extension. You start to see how everything gets very expensive fast. And while you can afford DK Metcalf, you could make it work from a moving the money around standpoint. It's where do you make those sacrifices from a price standpoint? If you have 2 highly paid wide receivers, a highly paid quarterback, a highly paid edge rusher, some highly paid cornerback, some other highly paid players, you start to kind of go with low-level, inexpensive veterans. You start to go with rookies to fill out the back part of the roster just because that's what you have available to you with the investment in a guy like DK Metcalf. So 2 times you pay for DK Metcalf, one with the draft capital to go and get him and one with the money to keep him around. And you probably have to get him interested with the contract before his reps even sort of bring it to the Seattle Seahawks. And then you got to get the Seahawks interested with the price. So ultimately, do the Texans chase this guy? Should they do their homework? I say yes, go for it, but only on Houston's terms. Don't get caught up in a bidding war with the draft capital. Don't try to get taken to the ATM by DK Metcalf. If there's a point where the Texans are a little uncomfortable, hey, pull the parachute, eject from the conversation, move on to somebody else, spend that money that you might have invested in DK Metcalf elsewhere on this team. Use that draft capital to improve the team. So I'm in on this, but only in a very specific section, not too much draft capital. Obviously, I know he's expensive. I know he probably costs the 2nd-round pick at the very least, and not too much money, not way more than Nico Collins makes. And if you could get him right on Nico Collins' number, I suppose maybe you'd do that. I don't know if DK Metcalf would do that. That's the whole negotiation part of things. But the Texans need to do their homework, need to do their due diligence. And if they find out that the price actually isn't that expensive, well, go out there and turn into a physically dominant duo at the wide receiver position with Nico Collins on one side and DK Metcalf on the other one. What say you? You chasing DK Metcalf? If you're the Houston Texans, let me know in the comment section down below. On your way down there, thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to check out SNL with myself and Landry Locker from the Locker Room. Do that each and every weekday at 4 p.m. over on the SNL channel. That's in the description down below. Appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait until we talk Texans again soon.